Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest, Her Excellency, Ambassador Saad Chalabi, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister. Madam Ambassador, a very good afternoon to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, dear.
Thank you very much for joining us, Madam Ambassador. And of course, the AFDB group event that is being held in the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh in attendance of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is being held under the theme of mobilizing the private sector to finance for climate and green growth in Africa. How do you see the theme, and why is this year's event focusing on green growth in the African continent?
Well, as you know, this is a very important meeting for us,
Yes.
for Egypt and for Africa.
Yes.
Because because of the COP27, which was hosted by Egypt in last November, and all the recommendations and the conclusions of the meeting were very much around the financing of the green projects and the green economy, and so this meeting is very much in that direction.
Yes.
To empower the private sector in order to and mobilize the resources in order to finance the projects that are focused for the climate change and the green growth in Africa.
Absolutely. Madam Ambassador, of course, we've seen in the President's address how he has also said that climate change consequences have really pressured, the least developed nations, especially in the African continent. How do you see, the mounting challenges faced by African countries, and what role do such financing institutions have to play in this regard, ma'am?
Well, as you know, it is very important and very difficult for Africa to attract financial institutions to finance projects in climate. And although we are facing a lot of negative repercussions of what is happening in Europe and in the West.
Yes.
But at the same time, we are not able to safeguard our climate and our institutions are not able to finance the damages that are happening from the climate change and the industrialization of the West. So what we need from this meeting is a framework to share experiences and to strengthen the private sector and to finance the domestic projects that are coming from every country in Africa. And to, of course, to help the international financial institutions to invest in these projects, because these projects need to be boosting the private sector. It cannot happen without the support of the government to the private sector.
Absolutely. Ma'am, you said a very important issue, which is that of, the role that is shouldered by, international financing institutions concerned with such development issues, ahead of which, of course, is the African Development Bank. Now, such meetings offer a great chance for such institutions to really see what needs to be done on the ground in order to assist developing nations in this regard. How do you see the role played by financing institutions?
Well, this is what they are going to discuss in the next few days, because there are 3,000 representatives and partners coming from bilateral and multilateral development agencies, so leading academics, NGOs, civil society, private sector. All these people have to come together in order to be able to reach an agreement in order to also do an inclusive and sustainable growth. Financing green economy in Africa is one of the important projects or important issues that have to be handled by the government and the civil society, the NGOs, the private sector. So all these sectors have to come together in order to face the challenges of climate.
Absolutely. Now, President Sisi has said in his address that, drought repercussions have affected the African continent, and calculations are at around losses of $70 billion US dollars alone. And he said such meetings offer a chance to really exchange expertise to face climate change repercussions. How do you see, the exchange of expertise benefiting specifically African countries?
Well, it's very important, of course, because the exchange of expertise is very important, because we have to know what to learn from the lessons learned and to strengthen our private sector in order to be able to face the challenges and attract financial institutions to do projects in low carbon and in practical policies. And of course, the integration and the development of Africa in COP27, it helped a lot in this regard. And it is very difficult to think that mobilizing resources, now it is only 12% that is financed for climate. The resources must be much more than this. 12% is not enough for financing the projects for climate and to face the problems of climate. So there is a necessity to scale up the private capital, to scale up employment, to face the challenges of Africa in order to use the green technology for food security, and to face the increase in population, the rising of inflation, the geopolitical tensions. All these have to be faced by the cooperation between the private sector, between the governments, between the NGOs.
Yes, indeed. The President himself also spoke about the importance of turning to, green growth. How important is it, do you see, for Africa to turn to green development? And how can, the green economy help African countries not just, counter things related to climate change, etc., but also reach other aims like food security for the continent?
Well, this is what we've been discussing in the COP27.
Yes.
That the African continent is suffering from all the industrialization projects and the energy production of the West. And African climate has been suffering, especially in the carbon and the climate is the desertification, the lack of water resources. All this is very big problems that are facing Africa, and there has been no response from any Western financial institution in order to reach agreement. But that is why these annual meetings, and especially the African Development Fund with the African Development Bank, are facing financial institutions with the conclusions of COP27 that obliged the Western countries and the financial institution to finance the damages that happened to Africa. So there has been a special fund made for the damages that has been done to Africa due to the problems of climate change and the carbon emissions that has been coming from the industrialization of Europe. So what is needed to do is concrete action, concrete conclusions, concrete financial commitments towards the project in order to reach green growth and to reach sustainable development growth and inclusive of Africa in order to do green economy projects and to empower the private sector to be able to finance these capacities, use the capacities and use the experience sharing for the benefit of African projects.
Absolutely. And Madam Ambassador, also the President praised, Cairo's decision to turn to renewable energy. And this leads me to my question. He said the private sector should be also encouraged to finance such environmentally friendly schemes as well as what you said. But what measures do you think are needed to attract the private sector to such projects? How do you see their role in this regard, especially in financing deficits to the green development projects all around the continent?
Well, as you know, that these kind of projects need special technology,
Yes.
high-level technology. So, and they need also empowerment of the government, like giving them reduction of taxes or maybe tax deductibles, so that they can survive at least for the first 5 years of their lives. So the private sector will definitely need support from the government to give loans, very soft loans for long term with very low interest, and also to reduce or deduct the taxes, and also empower the technology, the high-level technology that is needed for the renewable energy. Because, for instance, Egypt has the power of the sun, the wind, and many other renewable energy projects are dependent on the nature. So we have to preserve our nature, and we have to have the government support for this.
Absolutely. Now, Madam Ambassador, several other speakers also addressed the gathering today. Amongst them, of course, was Akinwumi Adesina, the African Development Bank Group President, who addressed the session and said the bank is contributing within 40% in financing climate initiatives in Africa. How do you see this translating on the ground, and what projects, in your opinion, need to be prioritized in the upcoming period?
Well, that depends on, of course, the projects that are already on the table. So, if there are already projects that are presented to the bank that have already guarantees and that they have bank financing guarantees, then it is easy, of course, to go ahead, but still. There has to be support from technological, high technology companies in Africa, and to give them the experience and to let them the lessons learned, so that they start from where they ended and not to start from scratch. Because of course, African countries don't want to go through the whole process from the beginning until the end. They want to catch up with the technology that they have already lost. So the African Development Bank is discussing how they can finance these projects, these green growth projects, and they can also engage several countries in one project, so that they benefit from each other, like those who have access in the sun and those who have access in water, so they can be merged like other countries in Africa that can be linking their development projects together.
Right, and
in
also
East Africa, for instance.
Yes. Yes, Madam Ambassador. Egypt's central bank governor Hassan Abdullah expressed hope that such, group meetings will materialize future mechanisms to deal with climate change-related issues. How important is this to, plan in advance, not just deal with the consequences of climate change?
Well, it is, as I said, it is very difficult because climate is changing and the African continent is suffering a lot. But there is always hope that if the bank maximizes the resources that are available for economic development, then they can also create awareness for the importance of business and the importance of climate. Then there has to be, for instance, a lot of resources directed to the awareness to keep the climate and to keep the nature and not to change the people themselves have to preserve water. The people have to know that this is scarce. It's not something that they will get all the time. So the bank has to have a special awareness project so that to inform the people of the future and how difficult it is going to be for maybe the 10 years ahead, and we have to preserve the resources that they have, the natural resources, in order to be able to do the transition needed to reach the green growth.
Right, absolutely. Madam Ambassador Saad Shalabi, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister, I'd like to thank you very, very much, ma'am, for all your time and your insight and for joining us here on RTV and our continued coverage. Ladies and gentlemen, a short break and we'll be back for more. Do stay tuned.
نحن لدينا مصير مشترك.
مصر تسلمت